Hey everyone, my name is Sid Gundavarapu. I'm a product manager at Microsoft. I'm excited to see you all at the Power Platform Community Conference, where I'll be hosting a workshop on admin governance and security of Power Platform, and you'll also be able to do some hands on practice. In the meantime, do tune into the low code approach to stay informed on everything low code, everything Power Platform, and also listen to some of the inspiring speakers. Thank you all. I look forward to seeing you all at the conference.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of The Low Code Approach. I'm Sean Feeney, a Senior Product Marketing Manager on the Power Platform team, one of three amazing hosts, and I'm joined by...
I am the other amazing host, and I am Wendy Haddad. I'm a Senior Cloud Solution Architect, Delivery Lead, and a former Microsoft customer. And should we let Ken into the club, Sean? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty amazing host, so yeah.
He bumps up to Dr. Awesome, I think. So introducing Dr. Awesome is...
You know, Wendy, I was just anticipating all of the slack that you would give me today as we get ready to introduce our guest, who is hopefully here to help us solve some of the Laugesen problems that we have within the platform and as it relates to performance. Give it up for the man, the myth, the legend, Austin. How are you today, sir?
Hey, Ken, Wendy, Sean. Thank you. I'm doing well. I'm a product manager at Microsoft. I work in Power Apps, and then I also work on performance initiatives for the greater Power Platform.
Austin, you said the magic word, performance, and so I think you set what the topic's going to be for our episode, specifically Power Apps performance, and maybe we'll dabble into Power Platform as a whole. But yeah, so that brings us to our first question. You know, the customers have been saying, how do we monitor performance? How do we improve performance? And this is a pretty rather large question here, but we'll start off with, what are some of the recent improvements that have come to Power Apps for helping customers monitor performance of their applications?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I'll talk about a few things that have been in product a little bit, and there's been some extra goodness added to those things that have been in the product for a while. And then I'll foreshadow at some things that are coming that I'll just hint to a better, richer future world that hopefully isn't too far off if I do my job well. But let's talk about Power Apps because it's closest to home for me. For the people who are building Power Apps, they're inside the studio experience. If they're not using App Checker, if they're not using Power Apps Monitor, first and foremost, I highly recommend using those. Now, let's talk about the pros and cons. The pro is that you can get a lot of rich information, which just says, hey, I looked at your app maker. I want you to understand this about your app, and you may consider changing this. That falls in the order of hey, you do a blocking app on start. That means end users have to wait longer than they need to. No one wants that. Please change that. That's an example of things you can get out of App Checker. Power Apps Monitor is, hey, yeah, go run your app. Let's go see what it looks like in the wild for at least one session. And so you can get a feel for, hey, when my app talks to that data source, Dataverse, SharePoint, whatever it is, really, how many network calls are happening? How slow are they? How fast are they? So I would say App Checker, Power Apps Monitor, those are tools to use. Now, that complements the Dev Inner Loop. I would also recommend Azure App Insights. So what you don't get in the Dev Inner Loop is how is an application or a digital solution working in the wild? Azure App Insights can fill that gap. We, the platform, will go emit certain events to say, hey, when end users run your solution, whether it be an app, Power Automate, any other part of the Power Platform, there are all these events, these rich events, which track not only usage, but performance and availability. 100 users tried to use that app. Only 70% got in. Oh, do you know they all have to wait a really long time? Is it what is different in the wild versus which can be different than what you see in the studio experience? So I would say, hey, the 1-2 punch is use things in the developer experience or the studio experience and complement it with the tools available to understand what's going on in the wild. And I didn't touch on foreshadowing the future. Now, when I mentioned Azure App Insights, I know this is a technology that's wonderful, but sometimes it's perceived as out of reach for different reasons. This is acknowledged within the product group of Microsoft. We acknowledge, hey, there's probably more we can do to bring, let's just say, runtime, operational health data back to makers within the platform. So imagine you wouldn't have to jump to Azure because maybe Azure is out of reach. What if inside the maker experience, what if inside the Power Platform admin experience, we could give you operational health metrics and then guidance saying, this looks like an opportunity for improvement. Maybe you can make this change, that change, and another change.
So, Austin, if I may jump in just for a bit here, when I was listening to you with your opening there, that's kind of the direction I was going to ask. I mean, not get on my governance and security soapbox today, but simply ask, what about the maker? Like, who are we making these improvements for? What's the persona, if you will? Is it for the admin to say, "Oh, hey, Austin, Ken, the admin says go fix your app," or are we now empowering the developer themselves of the resource to understand and view the performance and then take the appropriate actions? Can you speak about that a little bit?
In short, it's going to go to makers and admins because we know those who develop digital solutions are the ones most empowered to go make the change or the updates required to just, shore up a digital solution for whatever audience uses that digital solution. But it's a tale of two worlds. Like internally, we like to talk about Power Platform being for customers that have 10,000 apps with 10 users apiece, and also for 10 apps that have 10,000 users apiece. And I'm not here to classify which ones are the most business critical, but I would say makers and admins have a very vested interest in understanding what is the health of business critical applications, regardless of audience size. And that's why we want optics for the admin as well. Oh, hey, admin, if you can signal what is the most important resources in your organization, we can make it easier for you to be proactive in detecting, oh, this resource is unhealthy. Something must be done, whether it be the admin that's also the maker, or giving the signal to the admin as an FYI and also giving it to the maker so they can go show up a resource that is critical to the business. We're in a game of business continuity and efficiency. When things don't work, we want people to know and fix them immediately.
So let me follow that question up with, I'm going to assume that from a maker perspective, a developer perspective, we don't particularly distinguish between a pro dev, if you will, or a citizen dev, right? They're all just developers to us, and we simply will provide those metrics to them. Now, with that said, we may sort of imply or show different things depending on how we are instrumenting that resource, like you mentioned App Insights, for example.
So there's a bit of choose your own adventure. I would say where we're going is let's raise the floor on the common understanding of operational health for every Power Platform resource. We acknowledge there's a lot of customers right now who don't know how to measure health. And that's not on them, that's on us. How do we help everyone understand? What does it mean to have a healthy campus app? What does it mean to have a healthy model-driven app? What does it mean to have a healthy flow? Well, what we use internally is stuff that we can make palatable for our end customer. And I would say the maker. And that's both the citizen dev and the pro dev, like the advanced makers or the common maker, whatever we would want to call them. It's our opportunity to just educate and then to provide guidance on what is healthy, what is unhealthy. And then really the journey is not just telling you something's unhealthy, but when it's unhealthy, we, the product, guide you to here's what you can do now to make this better. And so it's it's not even going to be about understanding the metric to the nth degree. It's about understanding, based on the guardrails and the guidance I've been given, what are things I can do to improve this?
So, Austin, I think that it's hard with the Power Platform because there's so much we allow people to do out of the box. We haven't even touched Copilot yet, right? Where we're guiding and we're ensuring those best practices. But then we also allow you to get really detailed and really customized. And so what are the common, you mentioned a couple at the top of the hour, but what are some of the common pitfalls that you're seeing people do in app development? We'll stick with Power Apps for just a moment. And then I guess, why are we even allowing them to build an app incorrectly? You said choose your own adventure. Why are we even allowing that choice if it's not a good practice?
Yes. So there's the exception and rule. As much as possible, we're trying to improve the product to guide people down the rule. Like the rule would be, hey, for any given resource, what is the performant pattern? What is the best pattern? But also with not just a productivity platform, but like a developer, a digital customization platform, we don't want to be in the way of, we just don't allow you to do something where you might care about using the exception. And it makes sense for your business process. It makes sense for whatever it is you're trying to do. And so, like, look, who are we to be in between what you really want and it's not going to be a problem for your business process? So, where we are today and where we're going to go is try to guide and make it harder to go outside of the anti patterns. Let's make it just very streamlined on you always go down the performant pattern. But we will always provide an escape hatch should you want to go an alternate route. Let me talk about one of the examples. So with Power Apps, for the longest time, we had a functional behavior, which is app on start, which is it is your custom business logic can run before the app opens. And it was always blocking. And so that means if your business wrote custom business logic that was remarkably slow, every end user running that app paid that tax and paid that time. Please don't block. Please don't make people wait if they don't need to wait. So as much as possible, that should never block. As much as possible, the logic in app on start should be minimal, not maximal. There are not a lot of apps. There are a few apps that have hundreds of thousands of characters and PowerFX. There's multiple expressions that just lead to end users having a tax. Now, here's the reality. There are some apps that have to run a lot of custom business logic before they start. If we know a customer or a business needs that and it's just paramount, we can guide them to a different world, but it may not be a better world because they know their world better than we do. So that's why it's a game of what path do we lead you down and what exceptions do we allow you to take?
So follow up to that, Austin, I appreciate that example, right, of the on-start. That makes sense. And it sounds like we're doing a lot of innovation around app on-start and explaining it as well as maybe guiding or whatnot. Are we also alerting people in product as they're building and developing as well as after and retroactively? Can you talk about that experience?
So yeah, like some of the things that exist today are like App Checker. I would say App Checker has some opportunity where it does a lot of analysis on an app, and it'll say, hey, Wendy, do you know this, that, and the other thing about your app? Maybe you want to tweak it. There's a lot of guidance that appears there that isn't always absorbed or taken into account. That's okay. Like there are reasons why that isn't absorbed. And that's why we're trying to complement what happens in studio with more information about what's happening in the wild. Because, say Austin builds an app and I don't appreciate that my end users are waiting 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 50, a minute to open an app. Only because I wasn't aware that's what's going on in the wild. So we're trying to complement some of the information we already relay with more contextualized, impact-driven understanding of like, well, hey, do you know 100 users have to wait a minute every 3 hours that they use this app? Maybe we want to fix that. Like maybe we can make your business process faster by improving the digital solution.
Hey, Austin, thank you for all of that. And I might be listening incorrectly here, but it sounds like it's very reactive in the alerts and the notifications of monitoring. Like, we've identified a problem, here's how to address it. After being notified so many times, you want to get away from that. You want to like help include these best practices and patterns into like a center of excellence and kind of prevent that, but like at scale. How do we help organizations get away from having to be so reactive in application, design best practices to increase performance all around?
The reality is like putting in better rails inside the product. Like the way to do it at scale up front, because we're really just talking about the upstream problem. It's like at the onset of creating a new digital solution, how do I just not break into jail? And that is going to be the golden path that would lead you down to the product. And I'd say, hey, with time, we're getting way more sophisticated. Like we have insights today that are like data and insights today that are novel in measuring, well, how many people go down what we think is the golden path today and what we no longer deem a recommended path. And so we're trying to take that data to then inform updating the product just so, when that maker enters for the first time, common maker or advanced maker, doesn't matter. Like let's lead them down the performant path. And so this is not really talking about center of excellence as a team trying to shepherd. This is more of even upstream of that, we're just trying to update the golden path in the product.
So Austin, it sounds like there's a tie-in to return on investment or ROI. You mentioned the time-saving piece, but it's not just looking at the experience or, hey, something's broken. I think a lot of times we get into the break-fix mindset, but really what you're talking about is more of an optimization of the app and saving our users time that they might be spending watching a spinning loading screen or something else. Would that be fair? Are there any kinds of impacts or success stories here that you can share from people maybe who are in companies who are benefiting from being more intentional on addressing these concerns for their customers?
Yes, absolutely. Without naming customers, the customer names I'm allowed to use are Contoso and Fabricam, our beloved Microsoft names. But no, I've been in customer engagements where it's like they built very sophisticated enterprise grade, like business critical solutions, but they say, hey, the end-to-end process, like users can get through it, but not as quickly as we desire. What can we do to improve this? And so it's funny, it's not about solving the problem. It's about, well, how do we get our digital solution to help users just do the thing faster? Because it's funny, the irony is like, that's what we're all about. Power Platform is about, you can build a digital solution, make some business process faster. But once you just have a new baseline, it's like, well, how do you glean more efficiency out of it? So I would say, yeah, it's not always about a broken experience. It's about, and check it out, we're in 2024. We all want to take for granted everything's lightning fast. But the reality is there's still a lot of stuff that leaves a lot to be desired. And unfortunately, it can be easy to create experiences that aren't fast as they can be or they should be in Power Platform. So we're just trying to, raise the floor to ensure more people can take for granted. Yeah, it's all lightning fast.
That's a really interesting point. I want to dive in there a little bit more because just for context, Austin, our listeners are a mixture of the developer side as well as business decision makers and business leaders and admins or some of the less technical citizen developers. So there's a lot of different lenses listening to this episode right now, and there's a little bit of an obscuring, right? We make things look easy in our software because we make it look lightning fast, but there's a lot of intentionality that goes in. Beyond just the reporting or alerting that we're talking about, is it worded in such a way or that we're teaching people and it would be accessible for a less technical person to be able to understand and learn versus just they get an error message, right? And they don't know what to do with it, or they have to go Google an error code or something else. Like, how are we educating in product to help elevate their design intentionality?
Land and expand. It is going to be the story. And there are some examples of like, the PowerCat team published a well-architected platform, and it's like remarkably high level, 30,000 foot view of like, you're going to build a digital solution. What are things you should account for? Now we want to couple with that with our documentation at like a 10,000 to 5,000 or a 1,000 or very granular view of like, if you're building an app that uses these technologies, like an app connecting to Dataverse, an app connecting to SQL, or a flow connecting to pick our favorite connector with an action, here's the recipe to follow. And that's just a documentation story. But then what we write as guidance and documentation of like the cookbook or the template to follow, that also becomes what we try to put in templates, like especially for the person who is not as technical, but they want to approach the platform. Well, this looks like a template that gets me off to a good start. And we regularly audit our templates and say, are these using the best of our platform in the most performant way? And if no, we demote and then promote new, or, we take away the old and put in new, just so like the reference copy is, using the state of the art and what we would recommend to anyone. And if they were to not read the docs, but just use that, it already follows what the doc says. And then it gets to, and this is where we're still shoring things up, and we will continue just with time. And sometimes it'll look like an error message, but as you're building your app, if we see you take a fork in the path, which is not the fork we want you to go down, we're trying to get smarter with not just a red squiggly, but instead of a dead end, we want detours. Hey, I'm sorry, I don't recommend going down that path. Here's the alternative. Do you want us to just change your Power FX in line?
I love that. Because again,
it's a journey.
So, Austin, allow me to interject there. The four of us here are all legally obligated to mention Copilot at least once. So, when you talk about smarter, wouldn't it be wonderful if we just had Copilot aid us in what you're talking about right now? Do we have any plans for Copilot integration? Like, how are we looking at, enhancing the user's journey with AI?
So, to check my box, I'm going to just say Copilot. But to actually respond to your question, the answer is yes. Although we have to pull in one of my counterparts. I won't be able to.
Hold on. Let me just say, you said Copilot like on the Lion King when they were saying Mufasa's name. Okay, like Copilot. Say it again. Woo, Copilot. Right, like that.
Well, no. Here's the thing. So I was in a fascinating meeting yesterday within the broader Power Apps org, and it was counterparts not just from Power Apps, but from across Power Platform. And there's a recognition of where we are today and where we want to go, and then just beautiful proposals of where we want to go. And I'll say there are a lot of rich visions, but I am not the best person to speak to, like, hey, in the studio experience, what are the more advanced things that Copilot is going to help us with? I know the answer is it is going to help us do more. But offline, I'll share some names that we should pull into this podcast.
Always appreciate it. Hey, so Austin, like you mentioned, noticing, during the build process of applications where they might be going down the wrong path and kind of trying to detour them back, the monitoring of app performance and trying to increase that. Can you go into a little bit more depth of some of the things that we are monitoring over here? Like, is it API calls to certain endpoints? How are we tracking that? And then also, who defines the benchmark of what like appropriate performance should be, and how is that communicated out?
So let me talk about what I think would be great in product, and we'll see if when it comes about. So part of what we get in our product today is like, we give some baseline, just visual reports of like, hey, here are users of an app. We don't necessarily always say who. We just say there are 100 users, there are 5 users, there are 10,000 users, and it's not really actionable. Like, it's interesting, but it's not always actionable. When we talk about futuristic, what's going on in the wild, and what do I just get out of the box? Performance is a great place to start because we know there's a lot of pent-up demand, but it won't always just stop. It won't stop at performance. But let me share some performance examples. And we'll start on the app side of the house. Every user cares how quickly they get to the first screen of their app. Like, I launched the thing. When do I get to interact with that first screen? When does all the data just appear on that first screen? And I know from the numbers internally, it's not always fast. Sometimes it's very slow. And I also know there are apps with many users where it's very slow. We don't want that for anyone. The customer doesn't want that for themselves. We don't want that for them. So it's like, well, how do we help customers out and just quantify it today? So 2 interesting end user experience markers that we can measure and we can help raise the floor on is like this notion of time to interactive. Like, how long do users wait to get to the first screen? The time to full load, like how long do people wait to see all the data to appear? Like, imagine you have a gallery or a data grid and you're just waiting for those rows to fill out. We can tell you that. And then with that information, you can, that and more that we can tell you, we can guide you to making that faster for the masses. Here's one example I want to give. Just sorry, I'm going to like tangent, but if I go publish an app and I share it with 10 people, but those 10 people share it with 10 other people or way more, like a much larger audience. Say everyone tries to launch that app and it was successful with 10 people and it failed for everyone else who was shared with. Say it was 100 other people who tried to get into the thing. Like, viral adoption, it exists. It is real within business organizations, especially if it helps people do their job faster. Who doesn't want to end the day early? Who doesn't want to end the day on time? Okay, like, let's just talk about app open success rate. It's not always 100%. Frequently, it's because an app wasn't shared with people. But how do I, Austin the maker, understand who tried to use my thing and who couldn't use it successfully? And who, like, what is that list of people? And can I audit it? And then figure out, yeah, I should share with them, but maybe not these other people. That exercise is remarkably hard today. But that's just a hero scenario of like, oh, let's just help people understand their viral adoption and who's trying to use something and just fails to do so. We're not saying everyone has to use a digital solution, but make it very clear who is trying. And then when it's reasonable to expand that audience, yeah, go do it. Use the easy button to do it.
So, Austin, I want to take advantage of actually having you here because I know that you have a very deep understanding of the architecture of the platform. So, in the context of what you just said, the first screen, let's talk a little bit about inside the factory, if you will, right? So, we've made a lot of improvements in terms of performance and geo-redundancy and things along those lines. But what exactly does that look like from a customer from the other side, right? So say, for example, I'm in the United States, or maybe let's say, let me put it another way, I'm in Australia, and the environment in which my app is hosted is in Canada. It's the other side of the globe, but it's a geo app, right? Like I need folks in Europe to access it and so on and so forth. So that's going to look differently and perform differently for different folks. So I have 2 parts of my question. One, how do we sort of handle performance for those types of applications in delivering, consistent performance across the globe? And then secondly, how do we ensure data resiliency, application resiliency, uptime, right, with that at the same time?
This is not an easy answer. So here's the reality. There's a lot of multinational companies who have this scenario. I'm going to say part of our to-do list is just helping customers appreciate which are the apps, like if they're not fully aware, which are the apps that are used across many geographies. And then teasing out opportunities of like, how could data be replicated in ways? Sorry, there's two comments. Like if we're talking about apps, you want the end user experience, the app, to be close to the user. And there's a lot we do just under the hood that once you retrieve that app will always load quickly. And that's getting to the first screen. But then there's a question of like, well, how do you render the data quickly? Look, if it's data tied to one region, there's only so much we can do. But there are going to be opportunities of like, well, how do we get data closer to the many geographies it may be accessed, with the caveats that come with like eventual consistency. There's not a lot we do under the hood with respect to that, but it is a frontier where I think there are many options that we could enrich in the future. I thought also, if you don't mind, I'm going to stand on the soapbox for a second, because like a lot of what I've said in the last 30 minutes was we're going to help customers understand what they can do to make their app or their digital solutions faster or better. And it's all on them. But I'm going to go in a soapbox and say, hey, no, it's not just you. It's us too. It's Microsoft too. Anytime I talk to a customer, I like to say performance is a tango, or operational health is a tango, but especially performance. There's the performance we give you out of the box. And this is to say, like, I've spent the last 2 years within the product group across Power Platform investing. So just the out-of-box experience is faster. And this is to say, like, look, what you get to take for granted with Power Platform is that we invest to make first-class experiences. And so there are many top-level performance metrics that are just objectively faster today than they were 2 years ago. And it's not that we ignored this problem 2 years ago. It's just we are proud of the fact that we doubled down on something that we've always tracked, but now we're just more judicious about tackling. And I'm proud, and I get to stand with a greater team that's not on this call of, yeah, Canvas apps are faster. Model-driven apps are faster. The mobile app is fast, like, in many regards. So anyways, Ken, you went with the multinational scenario. I gave the best answer I could for this state of affairs. And then I also think what do you get with Power Platform out of the box?
It's a valid answer. I mean, it always is with us, and with not just with us, right? Within our platform. We talk very much about our platform, but in development and custom app building in general, it's a world of it depends.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there is not maybe a single definitive answer. Over to Wendy.
We also love soapboxes on this podcast and may be slightly biased on that front, but it is very true here. So, well, Austin, I know you had a hard stop, and so we're going to have to end this episode, but we'll definitely want to bring you back on, maybe post-conferences when you might have more to share with us in the future. We'll leave like a little teaser for everyone that Austin will have more to share soon. And Austin, thank you so much for joining us. We got to get you out to your next meeting, but really appreciate your time, and we'll definitely look forward to having you back.